Slavery is one of the oldest and darkest institutions in human history, shaping civilizations while destroying millions of lives. It began long before written records, when the first powerful tribes realized they could force the weak to work instead of killing them. In early human societies, enslaving captives became a way to gain labor, wealth, and status without paying or rewarding those who worked. The first slaves were often prisoners of war, taken from their homes and forced to serve their conquerors. Over time, slavery stopped being just a temporary punishment and became a permanent condition passed down through generations. In ancient Mesopotamia, slaves built cities, farmed land, and served wealthy families without hope of freedom. In ancient Egypt, slaves worked on farms, in mines, and in households, helping sustain one of the world's greatest civilizations. Some slaves were treated as property, bought and sold like animals in open markets. Others lived slightly better lives, but still had no control over their own fate. Slavery became deeply connected to power, wealth, and economic success. The stronger a kingdom became, the more slaves it owned. Slavery allowed rulers to build monuments, expand agriculture, and increase their influence. In ancient Greece, slavery became an essential part of daily life and democracy itself. Even great philosophers like Aristotle believed slavery was natural and necessary. He argued that some people were born to rule and others were born to serve. This belief justified the suffering of countless human beings. In the powerful Roman Empire, slavery reached massive scale and complexity. Millions of slaves worked in fields, homes, mines, and construction. Some slaves were forced to fight to the death as gladiators for entertainment. Crowds cheered as enslaved men killed each other for survival. Slave revolts occasionally erupted, showing the human desire for freedom could never be fully crushed. One of the most famous revolts was led by Spartacus, a slave who dared to challenge Rome itself. Although the rebellion was eventually defeated, it terrified slave owners across the empire. Slavery continued because it was profitable and convenient for those in power. As ancient empires fell, slavery did not disappear. It adapted and survived into the Middle Ages. In medieval societies, slaves and serfs worked land owned by nobles and kings. Some were tied to the land, unable to leave without permission. Their labor fed entire kingdoms while they remained poor and powerless. Religion sometimes justified slavery and sometimes challenged it, but rarely did it eliminate it completely. The greatest expansion of slavery began in the 15th century with European exploration. European powers sailed across oceans in search of land, gold, and opportunity. They discovered the Americas and saw vast lands full of resources, but they needed labor to exploit those lands. At first, they enslaved indigenous people. Disease, violence, and overwork killed millions of native inhabitants. European colonizers then turned to Africa. This began the horrific system known as the Atlantic slave trade. African men, women, and children were captured, sold, and transported across the ocean. They were packed tightly into ships in conditions too cruel to imagine. Many died before reaching land. Those who survived were sold in markets like objects. Families were separated forever. Parents never saw their children again. Children never saw their parents again. Their identities, names, and cultures were stripped away. They became property. In the Americas, slaves worked on plantations growing sugar, cotton, and tobacco. Their labor created enormous wealth for European empires. Countries like Brazil imported millions of enslaved Africans. The United States built much of its early economy on slave labor. The British Empire became one of the largest slave trading powers in history. Slave owners used violence to maintain control. Whips, chains, and fear became tools of management. Slaves worked from sunrise to sunset. They received little food, little rest, and no pay. They lived under constant threat of punishment. But even in suffering, slaves resisted. Some ran away. Some sabotaged tools. Some preserved their culture through songs and stories. Their resistance proved their humanity could not be erased. Over time, opposition to slavery began to grow. Writers, former slaves, and activists exposed its cruelty. One of the most powerful voices was Frederick Douglass, who escaped slavery and spoke about its horrors. His words helped change public opinion. In 1791, enslaved people in Haiti launched a revolution. They defeated European armies, and created the first free black republic. This terrified slave-owning societies around the world. It proved slavery could be overthrown. In the 19th century, abolition movements gained strength. Countries began banning the slave trade, but slavery itself continued. In the United States, conflict over slavery led to civil war. Millions died in the fight. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared enslaved people in rebel states free. Freedom did not come instantly for all, but it changed the course of history. Slavery was eventually abolished in law across most of the world. But legal freedom did not mean true equality. Former slaves faced discrimination, poverty, and violence. Systems like segregation continued oppression in new forms. Even today, the legacy of slavery shaped societies. Racism and inequality grew from its roots. The effects still remain. Many people believe slavery ended long ago, but modern slavery still exists. It hides in factories, farms, homes, and streets. It takes different forms but the same purpose. It is still about control and exploitation. Human trafficking is one form of modern slavery. People are tricked, kidnapped, or forced into labor. Some are forced into prostitution. Others work without pay under threat. Children are especially vulnerable. They are forced to work instead of going to school. They lose their childhood. Debt, bondage traps people in endless labor. They borrow money and cannot repay it. Interest grows endlessly. They work forever without freedom. Forced labor exists in many industries. Workers cannot leave. Their documents are taken. They are watched and threatened. Domestic slavery traps people inside homes. They cook, clean, and serve without freedom. They cannot escape. Fear keeps them silent. Modern slavery exists in rich countries and poor countries. It exists in cities and villages. It exists closer than people realize. Globalization created new opportunities for exploitation. Cheap labor increases profits. Some companies ignore human suffering. Consumers often do not know the truth behind products. Slavery hides behind everyday goods. Technology also plays a role. The internet allows traffickers to find victims. They use lies and promises. Victims trust them, then they lose everything. Modern slavery affects millions today. More people are enslaved now than at any time in history. Freedom exists in law, but not always in reality. Organizations fight to end modern slavery. One of the most important is the United Nations. It works to protect human rights. Activists risk their lives to save others. Survivors share their stories. They expose hidden crimes. Governments create laws, but enforcement remains difficult. Corruption protects criminals. Poverty creates vulnerability. Desperation makes people easy targets. Education helps prevent slavery. Awareness reduces risk. Economic opportunity gives people choices. Freedom requires protection. History shows slavery survives when ignored. It grows in silence. It grows in shadows. It grows when people look away. Slavery is not just history. It is a warning. It shows what humans can do to each other. It shows the danger of power without compassion. It shows the cost of greed. It shows the strength of those who resist. Every slave who survived carried courage. Every voice that spoke against slavery carried hope. Every law that ended slavery carried sacrifice. Freedom was never given freely. It was demanded. It was fought for. It was earned. The story of slavery is the story of suffering, but it is also the story of resistance. It is the story of survival. It is the story of humanity struggling with its darkest side, and it is still being written today. Because until every person is free, slavery is not truly ended.